Hello, this is a continuation of the Madam Manhwa. Today, we will finish chapter 14 of the manhwa. The ending of the chapter turned out really cool, so I decided to stop there. In general, you will be very interested to see how everything concludes. But this will motivate you to subscribe and come back to watch the next part. Don't forget to like and leave comments as it helps promote the video. Also, subscribe to Facebook and Patreon so you won't get lost in case something happens. Let's get started. Last time, we left off with Uriam biting a snake near her intimate area, and Dalso was about to suck out the venom. He took off his shirt and laid it on the stone, after which he told her not to waste time and sit there. The girl does this and the hero spreads her legs to get down to business. Dalso tried not to think at this moment and focus too much on sucking, but he heard the groans of Uriam, which he could not believe. After all, this is the girl who constantly shouted at him with her ferocious voice now making such moans. Then she told him that in her opinion, in the very place near where she was bit, there might be some poison left because it could somehow spread and get there. The hero answers that it can be dangerous and begins to remove the veil with which she was covered, but she stops him and asks for a closed eye. Dalso closes her eyes and makes her way to the right place and starts sucking. There is only one thing in his head. He had to suck as hard as possible to prevent the poison from spreading. In the process, Dalso came across something from above with his nose, and assuming that poison could also get there, he decided to suck it out there, just in case. After that, the guy wondered why Uriam was shaking, whether it was too sensitive at this point. Then some bitter liquid began to flow. After thinking about it, the hero came to the conclusion that it was poison, opened his eyes, and saw that what he was sucking was not a trace of a snake bite, but an erogenous zone of the Uriam. He understands that if Hyung finds out about this, he will never forgive him, but he has no choice and starts sucking hard again. The girl stops him, believing that he is already tired. Dalso clarifies whether it was enough to suck out the poison, and Uriam calls him an idiot and asks, was there poison originally? He finally realizes that the snake is not venomous, and from the very beginning, Uriam just seduced him. The guy began to remember how she always took care of him. Even though he was younger by a year, she always behaved growing up. The hero thought, why didn't he notice before? What a great Uriam girl, so good and kind. Then he touched her face and they started kissing. Dalso had never seen such an expression on her face. And then he began to touch the breast, describing it as very large, elastic, and soft. In the end, it all came down to the fact that our boy started sucking nipples. Uriam, which is usually very quiet, moaned loudly. He put his hand on his ass, very surprising the girl, and then moved her to a more sensitive point in front. Some warm liquid flowed, her body became hotter, and Dalso said that he would now enter. By this time, Hyung had managed to run very far away and curse this snake. He decided that Dalso was most likely caught, but he is not one of those who gives up friends, and therefore he will probably be alright. However, the guy remembered the words Uriam said in the afternoon that she needed to see Dalso. He had an uneasy feeling and wondered what they could do together in the woods in the middle of the night. Taking a stick, he ran to the river, hoping that his friend would not dare to do anything like that. Meanwhile, Dalso was nervous because it was his first time. Suddenly he heard Uriam say that it was her first time too, so he asked him to be careful. The guy was shocked to learn this. He often had to see how Hyung tried to achieve Uriam, and he did not succeed. But he was far from the only one. Many of his brothers, as they call other slaves, and uncles are older slaves who have been staring at Uriam since childhood. Now he understood that she was so fiercely protecting herself to give her first time to a loved one. And then Dalso began to slowly make love to her, penetrating deeper and deeper into her. He saw that she was in pain and asked, shouldn't he stop? But she said to continue. Entering centimeter by centimeter, the boy soon reached the end, and together they experienced the most pleasant sensations. While Hyung was running at full speed and hoped that his friend was not doing anything forbidden with his sweetheart, our guys continued to do this by changing their poses. In the process, fortunately, no one was in pain anymore. When he got to the place, he did not find these two anywhere, and then hearing some sounds behind the bushes, he rushed there shouting, Dalso, you are a traitor, but instead he found two more cats. Hyung sighed and thought that he shouldn't worry because his little brother was not that kind of person. At this very moment, the so-called little brother was telling the girl that he was about to finish, and he was doing it inside. Uriam asked Dalso and who allowed him to finish there at all. He apologized and said he couldn't resist because he enjoyed it so much. She wasn't angry and kissed him, asking why he wanted to change place in the middle of the process. Dalso replied that he had a premonition that Hyung might return. As they walked back to their home, the hero carried the girl in his arms. She mentioned that she could walk by herself, but Dalso insisted it was easy to carry her as she was very light. Hyung was still searching for them, thinking it would be embarrassing to leave his friend behind. Suddenly, he saw a snake behind him, got scared and fell to the ground. But before the reptile could bite him, it was killed with an arrow shot. It turned out to be Miss Surim, who asked Hyung if he was ashamed to be afraid of a snake. The next day, while the guys were cleaning the yard, the hero was thinking about what happened the previous day and smiled, realizing he had become closer to Uriam. Hyung noticed that he had been smiling all morning and asked about his night and why he returned so late. However, Dalso lied and said he couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk before coming back. But Hyung knew his little brother was lying as he avoided eye contact. Suddenly, Uriam arrived and ordered them to separate, and our guy noticed that she was in a bad mood. Dalso wondered if Uriam was upset because of what happened. Meanwhile, Sohee, who had just woken up, couldn't understand why all her thoughts were occupied with Dalso. While she was contemplating this, Uriam came for their daily morning routine. She asked Madam why she looked exhausted, and Sohee, realizing she couldn't tell Uriam that she couldn't sleep because of thoughts about Dalso, replied that she was fine and had just slept poorly. Then Sohee looked at Uriam and wondered if she had ever shared a bed with a man, considering they spent a lot of time together and got along well. She also often saw her with Hyung, who was flirting with her. After tidying up the room, the servant advised Madam to rest and left. The lady thought about how in the past, whenever she faced difficulties, she could always turn to Uriam for help. But now, that wasn't an option, as it was related to Dalso. Unexpectedly, the lady imagined that they had already engaged in this, and those thoughts were driving her crazy. Outside, the hero saw his returning friend and called out to her, but she responded with a cold look. The guy couldn't understand why it had become so difficult to talk to her now. He observed her working and decided that he needed to have a private conversation with her. Hyung closely watched them and decided not to take his eyes off him. However, the head servant arrived and called him, saying that he was about to distribute new tasks and needed his help. Hyung tried to escape, pointing to Dalso, claiming he was smarter, so they should take him instead. But the head servant continued to drag him away, stating that everyone knew Dalso was more famous for his strength than his intellect. After they left, the hero approached Uriam and said they needed to talk about the previous night. She reassured him not to worry and said she was fine. The guy wondered why it had become so hard to talk to her now, especially when they were so close. The girl looked at his contemplative expression and asked him to follow her. They entered the barn, where Uriam asked him, what exactly does he want to talk about? Nervously, Dalso replied that he wanted to repeat what happened yesterday. She inquired why she should do that, especially when they weren't even married. However, she noticed his wand standing and decided to help him a little. Meanwhile, a maid came to the lady of the house to report that Kim Pan-gwan, the third son, a fourth-class official, was on his way to them. What is he doing here? It doesn't make any sense, Madam asked. The servant apologized and explained that it was because of Miss Surim. It turns out that Miss Surim declared that she wouldn't marry a man weaker than her. At first, no one took these words seriously, and they began to challenge her. But she defeated everyone in seconds, convincing the girls that they weren't manly enough for her. Kim seemed to take an interest in her. Then she went to visit her eldest daughter, entering the room. Madam scolded her for sleeping until noon and ordered her to dress even during sleep, as women should not expose their body. She also told her about the officials who would come to visit her personally. Surim replied that she had already told her she didn't want to marry a man weaker than her. Her mother advised her not to be stubborn and asked, "Is there anyone stronger at all?" Surim remembered Yusin and answered that yes, such a person exists. Meanwhile, Sohee wanted to talk to Dalso about something, so she was looking for him. A young servant girl approached her and asked if she could help her. The lady said that if she helped find Dalso for her, they could skip rope together afterward. At that moment, Uriam asked why Dalso had an erection in his pants, and he replied that it was because he kept thinking about what happened yesterday. The girl explained that yesterday everything was special, but if his friend stays in this state, it will be very painful for him. So she asked him to take off his pants to help him. After wrapping her arm around him and wondering why he was so hard and hot, Uriam made a few slow movements with her hand and finally took him in her mouth to help her beloved calm down. And Dalso began to enjoy it. He knew that this could be done with mouth, but he did not even suspect that Uriam could do it. He liked to feel her soft tongue and feel how his dignity went deeper and deeper. In parallel with this, the girl approached the shed still looking for the hero. After a few attempts, she looked into the right hole and wondered why his pants were down and his breathing was strange, but decided not to go in and hurried back, thinking that it would be better to just tell the hostess that she found him. Suddenly, Uriam screams because Dalso splashes on her. He quickly apologized, explaining that he just couldn't resist. Uriam wondered why her head was spinning, and she also started burning in her stomach, and it was just from one smell. After the girl mentioned that if they stayed longer, someone might catch them, she tried to leave. As she was about to go, Dalso grabbed her hand and asked her to stay because his equipment was ready for a second round. Meanwhile, the servant girl reported that she found Dalso in the barn. She said that her little brother was acting strangely. He wasn't wearing pants, and he was breathing heavily. So he thought he was doing the same thing he did in the forest yesterday, and thanked the girl for telling her about it. Let's go back to the barn. There the guy already threw his girlfriend on the hay and lifted her skirt. He noticed that she was wet and decided that she wanted it too, and the girl herself tried to tell him that they had been here together too long and they could be seen. But she didn't have time to finish as she screamed when Dalso brought his wand inside. He noticed that her intimate place had changed. Yesterday it was narrow, and now it's just right. Meanwhile, so he was heading there, thinking that the hero did it yesterday, thinking about her, and now he is doing it again. And Dalso dreams of making love to her every day. Yuriam was thinking that yesterday they were doing it for the first time, so why is it so good today? She understood that he had to be stopped, but she liked it so much that she couldn't do it. So he was already standing behind the door and assumed that if she suddenly entered and caught him in the act, he would get angry. And if she warned him that she was coming in, he would have time to get dressed. Well, since he really wanted to see his big device again, she would have to enter without knocking. Dalso noticed someone trying to open the door, and that's where we'll end it today. To see the next part, subscribe to Patreon right now. Also, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you don't miss the continuation. And please like and leave comments, it really helps promote the video. Join the Facebook group so you don't get lost in case the channel gets blocked. Your support greatly helps this channel. Thank you very much for watching. I'm off to make the continuation, which will be out in about a week on YouTube, but it's already available on Patreon. Goodbye, everyone.